Hey guys, Sarah Mueller here from Decluttering Club and Declutter My Home, and I wanted to jump on here and talk about boundaries, healthy boundaries. This comes up so much in our Facebook group, and I just felt compelled today to hop on and share this with you. I apologize, I have not been live a whole lot lately, and it's just been really busy with kids and summer and all kinds of stuff. But I have some thoughts for you about boundaries and healthy boundaries and how important they are, because they are so important. Boundaries are something that I did not understand for a really long time. I've only recently come to understand boundaries and appreciate them, and they have been life-changing for me. So let me tell you a little bit about what is a boundary, first of all. I'm hoping you guys can hear me. In fact, if you can hear me, give me a thumbs up. I would really appreciate that, because I want to make sure everyone can hear. But what is a boundary? Okay, so a boundary, if you think about physical boundaries, boundaries are lines that mark, the property, your property of your yard. And oh, hi Nellie, I'm so glad you made it. Awesome, good job. Boundary could be the marking where your lawn ends and your neighbor's begins. It could be the boundary of a state, a country. It marks where one person or one entity's ownership ends and someone else's begins. Okay, so when we're talking about personal boundaries, what we mean is a personal property line that marks those things for which we are responsible. Okay, so that you may have boundaries set around the things that you do in your home, and maybe the other people in your home also have boundaries, and so they know they're responsible for X, Y, and Z. Maybe there's a person who's responsible for, lawn care, and that's their boundary line. Nobody else even worries about it because they know that one person is going to take care of it. But the problem comes in when we don't have clear boundaries. And it's such an easy trap to fall into. So if you don't have clear boundaries, that means that you kind of pick up the slack for everybody else. So if they ignore something, instead of that turning into a problem for them, someone else runs along in and takes care of that problem. Let's say, going back to the analogy of physical property, if your neighbor doesn't water his lawn, and watering your lawn is something, or maybe he doesn't cut his lawn, and it really bothers you, and you go and cut his lawn for him, he's never going to start cutting his lawn, because why should he, right? He has no incentive to do that. And so you're stepping over his boundaries and taking care of that problem for him. So this translates really clearly into difficulties that people, moms in particular, at least as far as I can tell, women run into at home, because we don't have strong and clear boundaries over what's our responsibility and what's someone else's responsibility, and we're willing to go in and just clean up after everybody else. And I mean that in a literal way, and then also in a figurative way. So it might be, let's say, your kid's homework. If you have a teenager, that teenager probably should be responsible for his or her homework, right? And if you're always rescuing that kid, then they are never going to learn to do homework, and you're really overstepping your boundaries or his boundaries by running in and rescuing him there. So I hope that gives you a good idea of what boundaries are. There is a series of books that is fantastic, and it's called, appropriately enough, Boundaries. And this is the Boundaries with Kids version. But there's a Boundaries for Marriage, there's boundaries, just the plain old boundaries, which was just so, such a light bulb went on for me when I read this, because I kind of always thought, it's my job to take care of everybody else. I need to not be selfish, okay? Sometimes it feels selfish if we say, no, that's not my job, right? Especially at home. If you say, no, that's not my job to do X, Y, Z, or, it's not my problem that you didn't take care of this thing, and now you expect me to rearrange my life or my schedule because you didn't do what you needed to do. So those are boundaries that you can enforce. And we'll get to that a little bit more, how that works in a second. But I want to talk about what happens if you don't have healthy boundaries, personal boundaries. And let me know if any of these sound familiar to you. You may get burned out. You may find yourself constantly trying to run after and clean up after everybody else, figuratively and literally. You may be exhausted from trying to carry the load of everybody else because you're managing their lives as well as your own. You may you may experience resentment, right? Let's see, Nellie said, how do you let things go so that a child learns lessons? Yes, okay, good question. I have a suggestion for that. You may have a lot of resentment. You may, and you might be repressing that. You might be like, it's wrong for me to feel bad that I have to do all this. This is my job, right? As a mom, as a wife, it's my job to do this stuff, but you might start getting really irritated that you're always relied on to do all of these things, right? You might feel like a martyr. This is a really big one. And nobody likes a martyr. Nobody wants to be a martyr. Nobody wants to be around a martyr. It's just not a nice place to be. Okay, so those are all signs and signals that someone needs to take a look and see if there's some more boundaries that you can put in place, and what would be some good choices to do that. Because these are things that can evolve, right? And you can decide to put in place a boundary that wasn't there before. That is totally cool. You absolutely have that right as as a person, as a wife, as a mom, all that kind of stuff. So these are things that are fluid and changeable. Okay. So Nellie asked, how do we deal with a kid who needs to learn some personal boundaries? You just let it go. So let's say your kid is constantly forgetting homework, and I'm not saying you never help out and you never bring the homework to school, but if this kid is habitually once a week, every other day, every day, forgetting homework or lunchbox, then you do nothing, and you let that kid face the consequences of his actions. And you might let him know up front. You might say, you know what, I'm going to bring your homework today to school, or you tell him after school, I bring your homework today. Let's see. Daughter is 21. Okay, perfect. A perfect time to learn this. It's so important to learn this stuff now, because this is the time that they learn how to be responsible. And if they don't learn it as a team, then they're never going to learn it. Okay, cleaning up after yourself. Okay, perfect. So you say, son, I love you. It's Saturday. Your room needs to get picked up by 12 o'clock, or you're not going to your friend's house today. And that's it. And you don't nag. Like, nagging is really a violation of boundaries. So you don't nag and you don't remind. You make sure they heard you, but that's it. And then you wait and you do nothing and you just go about your business. And then 12 o'clock comes and goes, and maybe the kid ignored you because because you trained them to ignore you, and they've done nothing. And then 2 o'clock comes around and they say, okay, Mom, can you bring me to football practice? And you say, I'm really sorry. I wish I could, but you didn't do what I asked you to do by 12 o'clock. So I can't help you, but I'm sure next time you'll remember. And the kid, if your kid is anything like my kids, will fall on the floor, maybe not at 16, but a lot of complaining, stomping around. There'll be a lot of unhappiness. That sounds painful. It is painful. It is painful. But you know what is more painful is not understanding that not being able to be responsible. Because if a kid can't learn to be responsible at 16, they're not going to be responsible at 20 and at 25 and 30 and things like that, right? It's so important, and it's hard, and it hurts, and you don't want to be the meanie, but it's done in love, and kids aren't going to understand it. They just aren't, and that's okay. I had a whole discussion on my personal Facebook wall this week about being a mean mom. I am a mean mom, and a friend of mine said, don't call yourself a mean mom. That's, it's the wrong term, and words are really important. They are important, but I kind of like the mean mom label just because I'm feeling good about sticking up for what, what's so important. We want these things for our kids. It's so important for them to learn this stuff. And like I tell my kids sometimes, you can learn the nice way or the hard way. So either they train, it's either their pain or ours. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's who's going to suffer? Either you're going to suffer because you have to clean, or they're going to suffer because they didn't clean. So either way, someone is suffering, right? How do you do this with 21-year-old? Okay, well, you know what? I think is it still cleaning? Is this a question of cleaning? And this young adult isn't cleaning up. I would think the same thing. If you don't take care of your things, maybe you lose the privilege to have people over. You need to find something that's going to work. Okay. Yeah. If you haven't done your fair share of the chores, or if you leave a mess, then I'm not cooking. I won't cook dinner. How about that one? Oh my gosh, right? Like, it's shocking. I've done that a few times. You guys didn't help clean up, so no, there's no dinner. I made myself dinner, but I didn't, I'm not like, no one's starving, right? Nobody's starving. But the nice thing about this is that you don't have to nag and you don't have to complain. You just carry out the consequence, and you might have to be creative, right? You might have to be creative with whatever consequence you put in place, and ideally it's something that is directly related to whatever issue is at hand. Maybe if they don't clean up, then you just collect other stuff in a garbage bag, and they have to buy it back for some pretty significant amount of time spent, and you dole it out little by little. That might be a good way to get your house cleaned up and also teach a lesson. Or I have suggested to other people that if an older sibling refuses to clean his or her room, you pay a younger sibling to clean it up for them, and then you take that money out of the older kid's allowance. Now, how much are they going to hate that, right? Like, their little brother or little sister's in their room, and they have to pay for it. Like, that is probably the ultimate indignity, right? But I bet you it wouldn't have to happen very many times for that lesson to sink in. And it's so important not to nag. It's so important to just, state what's going to happen one time, make sure they heard you, and that's it. And then just follow through. And you might want to start small, right, initially, because it just takes strength. It takes strength to be able to issue these consequences. And so you may want to pick something small to practice and to kind of show them you mean business before you go bigger picture. But decide what is the issue. Like, pick something that you want to work on. Is it being late? Like, is it missing the bus? Like, we had this before too. I don't nag to get my kids out the door on time. Thank goodness we don't have to get up early right now. I love it. And during the school year, the bus leaves at 7 o'clock. It's so early, and I am not going to nag and remind, and did you remember everything? I don't do that. I have a timer on my phone. Everybody can hear it when it goes off. Sorry about that. I need to have a new phone, and I guess I haven't told the phone that it can't interrupt me when I'm broadcasting. Oops, sorry about that. So when the timer rings, people should start getting their shoes on, get ready, and if you're not ready and in the car, the bus might leave, and guess what? I am not going to run after the bus. I don't do that. Or if you didn't wake up on time, I am not going to try 3 times to wake you up. You are on your own, and you'll wake up when you wake up, and then you're probably going to be late to school, and I will write you a note, and the note will say, so-and-so is late to school because he overslept, and that's the excuse. And that is huge for my kids. That is like horrendous for them. So that only had to happen one time, and they were like, oh, so never again. So try to make the consequence related to whatever you're trying to teach and enforce, and that'll make it a lot easier. And like I said, you want to pick a consequence that isn't going to make you suffer. Like, you don't want to let the kids stay home all day, because then that's almost like a reward. So you do take them to school, but you just do it when you have time, and it might be after school has started and after you've had some coffee and all that kind of good stuff. So that's an idea there. But yeah, it's definitely tricky with older. I'm guessing my oldest is 17, so he's not an adult yet. But that's how I would approach that. I would look for things that can tie in, whether it's having people over, whether it's, I don't know, cooking for them, or is it collecting their stuff so that they don't have what they need. Is it bringing them places? Is it, is it doing, there must be things that you do for them. So try to find something that will relate there that you can tie in. And then another good way to do this is when you say something like, if you're talking to a little kid, when you've picked up your toys, then we will have dessert, or then we will read a story. Like when, then is a really effective construct, because it's almost like magic. Like, oh, I want the dessert, so I guess I'll run and pick up my toys. So it helps kids see that there's rewards to working, right? Like work is not a bad thing. It's not punishment. It's not torture to clean up your toys or to clean up your dishes. It's just part of life, and that's what everybody does. And it's satisfying to do that kind of thing. We really want our kids to know that it's satisfying to take care of themselves. It's a good feeling to be independent, and we want them to understand that, right? Let's see, the tooth fairy meme. Yeah, absolutely, perfect example. Absolutely, the tooth fairy one was, I guess, that we shared a note on the Facebook page that the tooth fairy had left a note that she couldn't make her way through the bedroom because it was too messy, and so she couldn't leave the money. And it's like, oh my gosh, okay. And so the kids are so motivated to clean up, and it just clicks for them, right? Like if we're just telling them clean up because I said so, it's kind of hard for them to understand. But if there's a reason, and the reason is because then I get to read a book, or because then I get to go play with my friend, then there's incentive, right? And then they get into the habit, and habits are super powerful. And I could just go on about this stuff, but those boundaries are so important, and we see this a lot in our group, and we really struggle with, we have a private Facebook group, and I know a lot of you are in the group, and we get all the time, we have people posting how their family members do not have the same values as they do in terms of cleaning up or taking care of your own things, and just being responsible. And it might be because maybe this one person has totally taken that role on for many years, or maybe it's just that this person didn't have those values and is now just realizing how nice it is when things are cleaned up, and then is getting frustrated because other people are not seeing that. And excuse me, what I'm recommending is just to realize, where do you end and where does someone else begin? And it's all about communication. So if you've recently decided to be more tidy or declutter or keep things cleaner, and other people are not on board, I think the first step is probably a family meeting and say, you know what, this is important to me. I need you to hear me. This is important to me, and here's why, right? It's going to be great for us. It's a little bit more work, but it's going to be so much worth it. So let's all work together to make this happen. But then the flip side is, I'm going to set a boundary. So if you're not going to work with me on this, if you're not going to help me clean up after dinner, then I won't be cooking dinner, right? Or whatever your choice is. But and it's not to be mean. It's not done in a nasty way. You can say this with a smile on your face, and and expect that people might not agree. And that's okay. That is okay. And here's another thing I want to mention. And another thing that I have just recently learned is that you own your feelings, and you let everybody else own their feelings. So you are not responsible if someone is unhappy with you. That is their problem if they're unhappy with you. And if someone else makes you unhappy, like we get this a lot in the group, right? People are offended by things, or someone has, hurt your feelings. And I am all for being sympathetic, and that is like my superpower, is to be a good listener. But at the same time, I try to remember that if somebody upsets me, then that's something that I need to think about. And, what they say about me doesn't need to come into my head. I don't need to let that affect me. And what I say to other people, it's their choice how they are affected by that. So this can really help if you're dealing with these kinds of boundary issues, because if someone's getting angry at you for setting boundaries, that is not your problem. That is their problem, right? Which is so hard, but it's so good to know that, because there's just freedom, because then you take care of yourself and they take care of themselves, and then it just works out that way. And you may find that setting these boundaries leads to other things and leads to changes in your life, like it has for me. But it's just good to know that you're not responsible for other people's feelings and emotions, and that they have a choice. Everybody has a choice whether we're going to get angry or not angry, or whether we're going to help or not. That's a choice to make, and that's what I want my kids to know, and that's what I'm trying to remember all the time. Because then, I don't know, it's just really good when we remember that. All right, so that's my pep talk on boundaries. I am going to dig up, there's a couple links that I'm going to share in the comments here in a couple minutes, or I'll update the post afterward, that talk about boundaries. And like I said, this book, Boundaries with Kids, by Henry Cloud and Dr. John Townsend. Super, super great book. I'm going to read it again, I think. I haven't read it in about a year, but it's really good. And so that's my pep talk for today. Hope you guys are good. And I don't know, just lots of good stuff going on in our group. I really appreciate everybody and the encouragement that we're seeing there. And so I will see you in the group and online, and I'll catch you guys later. Okay, thanks. Bye.